I'm Dikmen, and I'm the president of CruiseReport.com. And today I'm going to talk about the future of the cruise industry. There's a lot of YouTube channels out there that every day come out with videos on cruise news and information, updates on when the cruise lines are going to start sailing or not sailing. And at CruiseReport.com, we don't really specialize in that sort of thing, and there's a lot of YouTube channels out there already doing it, and they do a pretty good job, so we don't really see any reason to do those kind of videos. But today I thought it was important to give you an update because a lot of you have reached out to us over the last few months and asked, how is CruiseReport.com? Are we still in business? Obviously, our website is still up and running. So I just thought it would be a good time to kind of give you a little bit of history on how the coronavirus has affected our business and how I see it affecting the cruise industry in the future. You know, one of the things that we kind of have built a reputation on is not really blowing any smoke when it comes to our followers, our subscribers, and people who read our reviews. We've been in business since 2002. We've been on over 135 cruises with 35 different cruise lines, and some of those cruise lines are no longer in business. So it's a situation we've seen in the past, and unfortunately, I'm afraid we see that's going to happen again in the future of the cruise industry. I can't think of any scenario any more devastating to an industry than this coronavirus pandemic has been. But let me give you my own personal history of what has happened to us with coronavirus and with this pandemic. Our last cruise was on February 15th. We actually got off the ship on February 15th. And we had Valentine's Day lunch on board the ship. And at that time, Ricky was not feeling good, even at that lunch. I don't know that she had a fever, but she was developing a pretty bad cough. We actually went to a show that night, and she just could hardly sit through the show, and she didn't sleep at all that night. She was up coughing all night long. We came home the next morning on February 15th, and you got to remember, coronavirus was just starting to get into the news with Diamond Princess and some of these other ships around the world. But it wasn't the thing it is now. There wasn't even a case of coronavirus reported in the United States at that time. The next day, on Sunday the 15th, I took Ricky to the emergency room at our local hospital because she was really feeling bad and she was running a fever. And she was diagnosed with influenza type A. Now, I have since come to learn that it is possible that you could be positive for influenza type A and coronavirus. May not be that likely, but it certainly is possible. But at that time, we had no test for coronavirus, so we didn't know any better. So basically, they put her on Tamiflu or Xofluza or one of those drugs and sent her home and said, you know, the standard thing, get rest, take Advil or Tylenol for the fever, try to, control the fever, and just get rest, drink a lot of water, drink a lot of fluids. The next day, I had a dental appointment where I was having some bone graft work done, and my dentist or my orthodontist gave me some amoxicillin to prevent any infection. I had about a 10-day supply of amoxicillin. So when we went home that night, or I went home that night, I started showing symptoms about 8 o'clock at night. I started coming down with what Ricky had. And I started developing a fever and a little bit of a cough and just really feeling yucky. Now, I can't sit here and tell you 100% for sure that she and I had coronavirus. What I can tell you is that we were the sickest we've ever been. We've been together 26 years, and I don't ever remember a time where she and I were both sick at the same time. And so this went on for a good week. Fortunately, I had amoxicillin. I believe that my flu or whatever I had did develop into bacterial pneumonia. I spent 2 nights with just some really bad situations, but I think that amoxicillin might have helped with that bacterial infection and might have kept me out of the hospital. I'm not sure about it, but that's just my guess. And I've talked to my doctor about this, and he kind of agrees that's possible. We were really in bad shape for probably 7 to 10 days, and I didn't overcome this for at least 6 weeks. I didn't feel like I was 100% back to normal for at least 6 weeks. I would have a couple of good days, but then I'd have a really bad day. So this thing hung on for a long time. Now, while all this is going on, our business at cruisereport.com is rapidly declining. We lost all of our advertisers, and our business survives on advertising revenue. There's actually 2 things that we need in our business, and one is content, so that you have something to see when you go to our website. You have a reason to come back and read our reviews or watch our YouTube videos. And the second thing is we need advertisers who support us. And generally, that's the cruise lines. But with this coronavirus pandemic taking hold while we were sick, I believe it was around March the 15th is when we lost our last paying cruise line customer. No advertising revenue since that time. We fortunately have another business, or I have another business, that has somehow been able to sustain pretty well. And it's in a completely different industry, and so I was able to subsidize cruisereport.com and keep it going. We also notified all the cruise lines that the services that we used to charge for to the cruise lines, that we would be providing those services free of charge to all cruise lines, whether it's posting their press releases or whatever information, emails, or things that we could send out to our 4.2 million followers. So that's what we've done up to this date. So we have not had any revenue at cruisereport.com since March 15th. Hopefully, at some point, things will get back to normal, and the business will continue to thrive and move forward. But I have some pretty strong thoughts on this. I don't see it coming back as strong as it was before, at least not in the short term. I think there will be casualties in the cruise industry from this coronavirus. In fact, I think there's going to be casualties in a lot of businesses because of this coronavirus. You can't simply shut down a country's economy for this long and not pay a price somewhere down the road. So it would not surprise me to see record numbers of bankruptcies in the coming months and years. This is going to go on for a long time. Not the virus, but the fallout from the virus. That's just my personal opinion. I hope the cruise lines do not tie their future to the CDC. My guess is that a lot of these cruise line executives and CLIA are waiting for some endorsement or some blessing from the CDC before they can cruise again. And in my opinion, that's never going to happen. The CDC is never going to tell you that it's safe to cruise. They're just not. They've had it in for the cruise industry long before coronavirus because of norovirus and other things. Their whole thing is about safety. In a perfect world, the CDC would have you stay in your home, put bubble wrap around you, never leave the house, never do anything. So where are we right now? Well, we're in a situation where the cruise line has really gotten a lot of bad press, and I think a lot of it is unfair. Let's take the Diamond Princess, for example. That's the one that really made the national news first. Now, that was a Japanese cruise. I believe it left out of Yokohama. I'm not positive about that. You can correct me in the comments down below. I'm sure you will. But to my understanding, Princess primarily sells to British and U.S. passengers. I don't think they sell to a lot of Japanese clients. I'm sure there's some on there. But what I'm saying is a lot of people had to endure a 10 to 17 hour flight in a very confined space, less than 12 inches from other people on 4 sides, before they ever got to the ship. Now, they talk about coronavirus like it spread on the ship, but how many people, somebody had to get on board that ship with the virus for it to spread on board the ship? They don't really talk too much about how coronavirus spreads on airplanes. And while cruise lines are basically sidelined and put out of business right now, airlines continue to fly at full capacity if they want to. Very little restrictions. So it's interesting to me that the cruise lines seem to be getting the brunt of this bad press. Now, just recently, just last week, Uncruise, a small cruise line that Ricky and I have been on 2 or 3 times, great little cruise line, by the way, they decide to sail out of Alaska on an Alaska cruise with about 34 people. These are very small ships, and they don't fall under those CDC guidelines. And they required everybody to show that they had been tested negative for coronavirus within at least, I think, the 5 days before the cruise, which everybody did. But the Alaskan authorities, if I understand the story correctly, tested everybody when they got to Alaska at the airport. Unfortunately, the test results didn't come back for 3 days. And by that time, Uncruise had already left on its 7-day voyage or 10-day or whatever it was. Well, 3 days into the cruise, Uncruise is notified by the Alaskan authorities that one person tested positive for coronavirus. Now, I'm asking you, where do you think that person got infected with the coronavirus? It's more likely that they attracted that virus on that flight going to Alaska. They obviously didn't attract it on the ship because they were tested before they got on the ship. And apparently, from what I can understand from the story, it doesn't appear that it spread to anybody else on board the ship. These are just some things for you to think about. Personally, I would have no fear of getting on a cruise ship right now for a 7 or 14-day cruise. I can socially distance on a cruise ship if I need to. If I have to, I can stay in my stateroom. I think it's much more likely that you'd be safer on a cruise ship than you would be on an airplane, yet we see no regulations, no restrictions on flying at this time. I have no fear of cruising. I don't even really have a fear of getting sick on board a cruise ship. I think the fear that I have, if any, and I think it's a fear that a lot of you probably have, is that one of the other passengers or several of the other passengers gets sick and the ship is quarantined and you can't get off the ship. I think that is a fear that the cruise lines are going to have to figure out how to overcome before they can get their bookings back to what they were before coronavirus. Because nobody wants to go away for a 7-day cruise and find themselves locked down on a cruise ship for 14 days. They have jobs or they have lives, they have careers, they have other things they need to do back home. They don't want to be stuck on a ship for 10, 14, 21 days or whatever the government at that time decides to do. So I'd like to know your thoughts. What are your fears on cruising, if any? Would you go on a cruise today if it were available? Would you have any fear of getting sick on board that ship, or would you have more fear of getting sick on board the airplane? Also, would you have any fear of the ship being quarantined or locked down just because somebody else may have gotten sick? Just be interested in knowing your thoughts. Please put them in the comments down below. Please let me know if you want more videos like this. I have a lot of personal opinions on a lot of subjects, so I'll be glad to tell you anything I can. Thanks again for joining me today, and check out our website, cruisereport.com, for the latest press releases and news information, and check out our Facebook page.